test-driven development is one of the best techniques for writing code. It not only raises confidence of delivery by providing tests for everything, but it also streamlines development. And using it with React is quite pleasant. Hi, my name is Tomasz. I'm a former tech lead and manager, and today I want to show you how you can write React applications using TDD. I will be using my React starter, link in the description, but feel free to use even an empty React application created with Vite. All you need is to have vtest for testing, MSW for mocking, and I think that's it. I described how to create an empty project with React in another video that I will also link in the description. Test-driven development is a way of writing code that prioritizes testing. We first write test suite, which will fail on purpose, and then we implement the functionalities. After everything works, we can refactor the code to make it up to the standards. The best thing about TDD for me is the fact that all tests are scenarios. For example, if we want our component to accept children, to have emboldened and italic options, and to emit something on click, we can use this as test case basis. For example, it should accept children, it should offer embolden and italic options, and it should emit an email on click. This way, we not only have all our requirements written down in a concise form, but we have tests to verify whether it is working. Test-driven development is normally described as a cycle of three: test, implement, refactor. Red, green cycle. So as mentioned, first we test, then we implement, and then we polish up the code. If you're interested, I have a piece about TDD in JavaScript, link in the description below. Okay, what we are building. I'll play a typical product owner here. We need a sign-in feature. Client should pass their username and password. This should be checked against our database, and if all is good, we should display the success message. If there is an error, we should display an error message. To avoid enumeration, we won't differentiate the error messages. No designs are specified as of yet. They will be provided later. And before you get smart, no, you can't say we won't start implementation without visuals. Sorry, I am just that kind of product owner. Jokes aside though, we know what to do. Simple form with two inputs and a submit. Two states, maybe a third one, a loading intermediate state if we find the time to it. It should take the payload, send it to the backend. Backend should respond with either 200 or 401. And yeah, that's it. Sounds simple. So like 2 weeks of work. Although, wait, I am not charging by the hour, so let's just do it now. As mentioned earlier, I am using my starter. So for having an input component, I'll generate the atom with the generator. So npm run generate UI. And yeah, I want an atom and it will be called input. So let's go there. Perfect. Yeah, and we have tests. Let's define what it should do. It should maybe just remove this. And let's just go with it should properly render. It should what? Display a default value. Display a default value. It should emit like an event when the value has changed. So it should emit an event. And it should also allow for the change of type. For change of the type would be better, right? So these are the tests that it should do. So let's start by implementing the first one. I am just going to put a placeholder to hello from input, let's call it that way, just to be easier to query. Okay, so the first test. I will be using get by placeholder text exactly like this. I mean, nicely done. Render is from, yeah, perfect. So this would be the first thing I want to do, render the component and then get by placeholder and have it queried. So I expect this to be in the document, right? Okay, let's go further. And this should display a default value. Yeah, wow, but it should be default value. This is React. So this should be like a value that has been placed by default, like from I don't know, pre-rendered view from it's taken from the backend. This very often a situation when you do this when you have account editing mode. Okay, so the event now. Right. So for the event, I need to have a change function that should basically accept a string and should return what? Almost correct. Yeah, change function that accepts a string and emits a void. This is the type obviously, and just to make sure our component understands this. Okay, so we can go again with go by placeholder text exactly. In here, it will emit the whole event. So we could obviously type the event here and have it like change event and go with this, but I prefer to have it like in here and change event of HTML input element. Yeah, change function with e.target.value. Okay, sorry, I had to save to have prettier applied. And now what we are going to do is we need to do fire event from testing library. And it should go with change, get this, and target will be target value. Yeah, just to be safe, text hello, value is change text, and expect change function to have been called with change text. I know this function is kind of testing the implementation, but to avoid putting some kind of state or some kind of observer, I just go with this. But I think for units, this is fine. And last but not least, changing the type of the input. So obviously inputs are text by default, but they can be password, caller, whatever. And yeah, again, I have to admit that Copilot is really starting to work nicely. Okay, so let's try and run these tests. Yeah, properly render because it's just, it renders because it's just an element in there, and allow for the change of type because this is like spread, right? So let's add this, expect, you know what, let's also make a no document container, expect container query selector input, nah, to be to have attribute ah to have attribute like password. Yeah, this sounds better. Constructor 49 Yeah, okay, so let's just remove this and see how this goes. Um, okay, so that is fine. Let's start with the implementation. The good thing is this is not really a lot to change, and for some reason I need to change this. I mean, I need to add this because even though this is properly defined, like if you go in here and you see that the uh, DOM library has its type defined, for some reason it doesn't really catch on. So let's go with text by default and have rest spread input type type and rest. Yeah, and now test should pass. It turned out I imported the expect from playwright and it worked slightly different. So, but nevertheless, we have all our tests passing, so proper test-driven development. So you have your tests broken, then you write implementation, and then you hope for the tests to be green. And normally we would do a refactoring phase here, but I don't see the need for it now. We are not styling it, so let's go with this. Cool, great. So we are almost done with a small component since I do have a button, a component that is built in, but every UI needs a text. So let's create a text UI component. And this now will be funny because I want this text to have dynamic element. So if I say this is a heading, I want this to be h2, for example. If I say this is a list element, I want this to be a list element. But if I want to define a custom element, so I want to pass a string that will work as an element. This should also work and should also have proper typings. But let's not jump to the implementation yet. Let's jump to the test. So obviously this will have a single. So what, render properly? I'd say this is good. Expect, yeah, cool. This one is good. And now it should change the tag accordingly. Hold on, this. I would also like this to be, able to force the tag. Should force the tag accordingly. So, for example, if I do heading, but I want this to be a label, it should be label. What else? I want to make it bold. Should make the text bold. Yeah, and what? Italic. Yeah, perfect. And since we are using Tailwind and in the background, I want this to have a color. Should change. Okay, so let's start with the implementation. So this one's first, right? There are two schools of thoughts. You can create several tests checking if heading, list item, paragraph is here, or you can just do it in one go. For this, I will go with the latter simply to save some time. So heading will be render of text with variant heading, right? Regular, like a paragraph won't have any variant because we want the P or a paragraph tag to be by default, and list item will be of variant list. Obviously, you can expand this greatly, and this is completely fine, but for now, for demonstration purposes, this is good. Heading contain query selector because we want to query the tag expect to be in the document. Exactly. Regular, we want P, and list item, we want LE, list item. Good. Cool, 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 cool. Let's go further with our glorious tests. Right, so now we want to force the tag, right? So as age 1. Yeah, why not? So exactly, expect query selector of age 1 to be in the document. I remind you that if no variant is passed, this should be a paragraph by default. For the bold text, bold, yeah, but no, 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 no. We are using Tailwind, so just text bold to be in the document. Font bold. Sorry, I forgot. Font bold. All right, let's go further. And italics, so this is basically the same. And I just realized that I could do here what I am doing in here, but okay. Expect italic. Yeah, if I remember, yeah. I just looked at the doc that I have open on another window. And color red. Red 500. No, it's like this, more likely, because this is a color from Tailwind. Okay, so running the tests will obviously fail. Uh, ex Sorry, this is like imports render properly. So yeah, it is imported because this is a div, and we are coming here. So this will be a real, honestly, a real fun one because I need to write a tremendous amount of types. Let's just go with interface props of generic type T that extends element type from React. T extends this and now extend the whole interface extends HTML attributes of JSX. Yeah, JSX needs to come from React as well. And now we have this, so we will have variant heading list. Let's give a paragraph as well. Paragraph. Variant as will be the T, so element type, so I don't know, any valid element type, right? So you can see that SVG, detailed HTML, object, whatever we desire as a tag, yeah, and the bold is a boolean, what italic is a boolean, optional of course, and color would be a string. Normally, I would type this more strictly with the color to have only colors from Tailwind, but from now, let's skip it. What we also need is to define a return type of the props. So return props of type P extends element type, and this will be props of generic P and omit, so we have to exclude something, component without props, so component props without refs, sorry, of type of P, and we need to exclude key of props, so base props, which also needs to be applied with a generic. I got inspiration from this from Stack Overflow from a guy named Gabin. Here is the link if anybody's interested. Yeah, this is pretty much a, I would say, a wizardry when it comes to when it comes to TypeScript. Okay, so now text, and this should be generic extends element props, element type, sorry, and we are defaulting this to what? To P, right? So what we want here is to have what? Variant, bold, italic, class name, and us. And of course the safe rest. And this doesn't return props, it has return props of T, of this T. Okay, so let's just go with class names of this class name because we will uh, push uh, corresponding colors, italics, bolds in here later on. And let's have a tag that will be of element type. Yeah, this is, yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is cool. Tag is assigned, but its value is never used. Exactly. But it will. And exactly, if we have an as prop, then we are basically ignoring this. You know what? We can actually make this easier, make this prettier to avoid having a switch if it's not needed. Okay, so now if bold, exactly, if italic, and if, sorry, color. I forgot about the color. If color text. Exactly, yeah. Because we want the text to be colored. And now we are returning tag with class, sorry, with class names joined and the rest. So it should have children and all of these things written in here, right? I know it's displays some wiggly text, but in here it's all fine. No, this is displays wiggly text, sorry. Yeah, because it has failed tests. So let's run it once more, and we are golden. Perfect. So this was the most complex component due to the typings that we've done, but now it should be smooth sailings. And we are, by the way, done with a small components because we have text, we have input, and we have button. Let's try with a slightly bigger component. For example, let's imagine an input. So every input needs to have what? Needs to have a label, right? To be accessible. So let's create a molecule that will do this. Molecules input test. And this is pretty neat because in here we will test only the new things. This is very cool when you're building things from the bottom. You go further and you have the basics tested, so in components that are using things that are higher, you don't have to test the functionality again. So what should it do? It should render, obviously. It should allow passing properties to input, and it should do the same for label, right? Because we have label will be the text component that we have done, input will be the input component that we have done earlier, so this will be just fine. We'll use the label, so label is label, and in here let's go with container because it queries nicely. Yeah, and expect contain query selector of input. So we want input and we want label to be in the document. Okay, passing properties. This also shouldn't be a problem. What property can we pass? Class name, for example. No, placeholder, no. I prefer class name. Class name is test class. Hold on, test CRS test class name. Test class container. And to have class test class. We obviously could just query it with a with test CLS, but I want to have input to make sure that the input has the proper class. And we can do the same here. So again, maybe let's just move it here. Label class, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm okay with this. So expect to have class. Perfect. Yeah, running, obviously. What's nice is that it didn't import the expect from playwright, so that's always a nice thing to see. Okay, so we are in the molecule. What we will be doing here is just pure composition. So we are importing input as base input, and we are importing text from atoms. And for props, we want HTML input element, and I think HTML props will be safer here, if I remember correctly. And we want label as a string, and we want label class name as a string. And in here, just a label class name. No, sorry. Label class name, and rest. Label class name. And let's have it a block because we want this to be separated. Input class name. You know what? Border rounded. Let's have padding. And I just, because I am stubborn, if we don't have a label console warn, input component should have a label. We need to address this. This is from molecules slash input. Uh, Consider using an atom instead. This is just me being quirky. Don't worry about this. Okay, so what we want is to have a wrapper, right? So let's have a div with class name of margin bottom 2. And what if there is a label? You know what? Let's go with this text as label class name join label class names, sorry, class names join, yeah, label and null, just to avoid rendering zeros and stuff like this. And base input, yeah, this is basically it. So I'd say we are good. Let's try running the test. Perfect. So another bigger component done. What we need now, since we are using the atomic design, is to have an organism that will be the entire view for the sign up. Remember that sign up is not a page, but rather a component. So let's create an organism and let's sign in. Oh, by the way, if you are seeing here errors, is that every new component, this is by design, and I've spoke about this in my starter video. Every new component has an empty props, which is an error. So it is there to remind you to fix it. We have what? Definitely it should render properly, but let's just have it should render username and password inputs, right? It should emit username and password on submit. It should error message. It should loading message because we don't have spinner if provided. And it should render a success message. And this is actually a good idea. It ran the submit button. Cool, so we have our requirements. Let's go. Just please don't import the expect from Playwright this time because this is embarrassing. Just to have it here, username label will be username, password label will be password, and it needs to have a submit function. So let's have default submit function is the test. I'm not typing it and because it shouldn't need it, but we'll see. Get by label text. And now let's just say that we want this to be in the document. So expect. Normally I would have this exported, but to keep this short, I am just hard coding a lot of things. But to be frank, this is not the best way of doing this. But to save time again, I am just cutting a bit of corners and expect container query selector button. Nah, this doesn't matter. Okay, so it should emit username and password. Working with a keyboard that has so many layers sometimes is really annoying. Okay, so username, user, password, pass, this is fine. Submit handler, vitess.fn, and what? Get by label, okay. And what we need right now is to fire an event. So fire event dot change on get by label username. Yeah, this is fine. And again, password label value password. Get by text submit click. You can do fire event, but this also works, and I find it a bit more cleaner. So now we need to expect exactly this. We need to expect handle submit function to be called with this object. So username of username and password. Okay, so this was the hardest test, to be frank. Now we can go with simple rendering. So render text, let's say it actually guessed right, but I would get by role because I would like this to be an alert. So get by role of alert. You know what? No, alert is get by role alert, and I want expect alert inner text to be sorry, error message, and obviously expect alert to be in the document. So just we are safe because this will be a different error if it's not if it doesn't have it in the text. Loading message. I don't think this should be alert. So what else can we put if not alert? Let's status. Yeah, cool. Yeah, because this status should be fine for a loading. This is not as important as a progress report because normally you have progress report as error or success state, but loading is an interim state that doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so the same thing will go for the success, but for success we don't really need to define the text because we will have only one success text. And for error, most likely we could get away with the same, but again, I am cutting corners here. And I will just copy this and sign in successful. What we need to remember here is to make sure that the texts are matching. It didn't import, expect, didn't. Okay. So yeah, unable to find. Perfect. So let's go to the sign in. in here we will need a bit more types, so definitely form event and form event handler. So I already know that. For props, we should do omit form event handler of HTML field set, and we don't want on submit because we will have our own on submit. And speaking of which, on submit will be like data of, yeah, this or promise void, because we might want to have an asynchronous function. Error is a string, loading is a boolean, and success, we didn't guess it this time. Okay, so again in here on submit, error loading success and rest as for props. And normally you would probably use something like formic or React hook form, but to, you know, or you could just, have the entire form handling outside the UI. But just to keep it short, let's just do it with credentials equals useref. Username and password are empty. Useref is a very neat tool that doesn't cause any re-renders, and it will just store this data. Okay, so now what we want to have is to do submit handler. So it's gonna be asynchronous function handle submit, and it will get a form event. So by default, let's prevent default, so it won't be submit. And if credentials use current username, hold on. Doesn't equal null. I mean, not null, but doesn't equal empty string await. And let's do try await on submit patch console error. Yeah, again, you wouldn't do this by console error. You would just submit this to Sentry or whatever, but we are just safe here. No, not suppress, import. Okay, and now we will want to have a function that will handle the input change, and I like to have this as a caret function, so value would be a string, and it would return another function that will be a form event of HTML input, credentials, current value. No, 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 no. Let's go like this. Yeah, this is way cleaner. Hold on. As always, got one bracket too many. Oh, okay, so we can just now go to the form. And what? This form should have an on submit, which is handle submit. Right in the form, let's render if error. Just go with this. If loading, hold on. And now we actually do have something for loading. Yay! And if success, roll status. Okay, so we have the most important things. We could obviously do this as a text component. Let's. Okay, so now we go with field set, and this will be our main container. So let's put the everything in here and text as what, legend, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. Let's have it a bit more nice. So text Excel bold and margin bottom 3 and sign in. And what, input from molecules, and it should have label of username, name, this we can disable it, and if it's loading or success, and on change, exactly, and the same thing for password. And here's where our type comes in. Perfect. And one more thing, but button type submit, and what class disabled? Yeah, why not? Actually, we can have this a bit should disable in here. And before you say I could memorize this, memorizing two booleans is more harm than good, because it will just occupy this memory space without really doing anything good. Okay, so we have an error here. Promise returning function provided to attribute where a void function was returned, well, void returned was expected, sorry. I know this, and this can be fixed by slightly adjusting ESLint. So in here, we just go with TypeScript, and it returns error, but not that attributes false. Yeah, and it is, sorry, it is good now. As you see, there's no errors. Okay, so this is a new UI, so let's test it. Okay, found a label. Okay, so this is on me. Because we need to go back here to the input and have name HTML4. So now we will have a label that corresponds to the input. Let's try again. No control. Make sure you're using the for or hold on. So let's for username. Which username? Okay, it doesn't pass the ID. So ID should be rest ID or rest. Okay, okay, 3 dots. Cool, cool. Things like this always. And in here it should be expected success, so simply success. Good, and we are done. So as you see, hard coding stuff bit me in the ass sooner than I expected, but hey, I am too lazy. Okay, so we have the entire UI for our problem. Let's develop a feature. So again, npm run generate feature, sign in. And this generator doesn't generate the test, so sign in test.tsx. And obviously import render, import sign in from sign in, and describe features sign in. Good. So what does it need to do? Should display the success message on success, and it should the error message on error. Remember, we have tested emitting, we have tested changing, we have tested rendering previously. So now we are only testing the business features, and this is great. Since this will be a rather lengthy test, I have something that I want to show you, which is called a test setup. So you're doing a setup which will simply do whatever you need to do in all these tests and just return you the selectors. So render result is render of sign in. What we want is email input, no, username input, sorry. Username, password input, password, and submit button, get by text, submit. And we are just returning render result, obviously, username input, password input, and submit button. And in here, it will be easier. But since we will be doing with asynchronous stuff like submitting things to an API, let's have an async. Valid username, password. Okay, so now what we want to do is to just we want to get by text because we want to or get by role. No, get by text because get by role would be okay with both error and the success. So get by text. We want email input, password input, everything exactly. And since we are doing asynchronous things, we need to call wait for and we need to do act. Act is a wrapper if you do something that will change the state of the application. So for example, if you're clicking something and you would later expect something to change in the DOM, for example, you do act to wrap it and to basically simulate more closely an actual event of clicking. So act, and what we want here is to, okay, so hold on, fire event. Fire event, not email input, username input, command, username and password input of valid password and submit click. Okay, and now exactly we want to await for this to change. We don't want to expect this right away because there will be a network communication in the background, so it won't happen instantaneously. And expect will wait a bit if I'm not mistaken, but definitely will not wait for a long time. And wait for will wait for I think 2 seconds or even 5 seconds, and this can be adjusted so you are sure that this is done properly. And for this, we can basically copy everything, but wrong password and error logging in. We have all this, and oh, this is unsafe. I will just suppress this because the problem is act is typed as any for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe this is a problem of typing of the version that I'm using, but this is typed as any, so it's kinda so unable to find exactly nothing is there. So in here, this will be again mostly composition. But what we will need definitely is API URL. What we will need is sign in as view from organisms and what use state because from React because we will control the state of it. Okay, so we can do a hook. Normally, you would have this handled by React query or by anything else, but in here I am just going with the simplest solution. Use state of undefined, so when we don't do anything, loading error success exactly, and it is undefined by default. So now we need a function to sign in. What we need here is basically username, password, and yeah, cool. So when we are starting to sign in, the first thing we need to do is to set state to loading, to notify the user that something has been started, the transaction has been started. And now we can go with our tried and true try block, try catch block. So request is what? Wait, API URL slash, yeah, out sign in sounds great. And method is a post and body. Exactly, JSON stringy file, this one. And now if request, so if it's not okay, if it doesn't resolve to okay, we are just setting state to error and returning. And if not, we are setting state to success. And if something goes wrong, just catch, an empty catch will be fine for now. Just don't go far with this. Okay, okay. And what we want to exactly what we want to return is the state and the sign-in function. Okay, so export default function sign in. Actually, it guessed pretty on the money. Just to be sure, error logging in. Just to be sure to have it here. Error logging in, exactly. So error loading if state is loading and success. It takes too long. And MSW is saying that it intercepted a request without a handler. And the error works because it intercepted an error without a request without a handler, and it just resulted in error. So every sign up error is an error. So it rendered properly. But in order to have this done real fine, we need to define a mock. So in here, we just create sign in slash sign in dot ts in the mocks. And what we want is API URL. And what we want from MSW is HTTP and HTTP response. Good. So sign in will be what? Post out sign in. Hold on. This is me hard coding stuff, biting me in the ass yet again. So I think, and it what request, and basically we don't need a username because we don't track the username, we track only password. So this should be await request. Exactly this as password string. Normally you can pass, this is this accepts generics, so you can have path params, sorry, path, body types, whatever. So you can pass this stuff in here and you can have more robust handler, but for our needs, this will be just fine. So if we provide a password that has the word wrong in it, we are returning HTTP response of 401, oh sorry, sign inference status 401. You pass the credentials, but they are wrong. And otherwise, we are just signing successful with 200. And now we need to import the handlers. So yeah. So this looks good, and let's run the test again. Works. Perfect. So this was the whole demo of how to write a test-driven React code, from testing the smallest elements like inputs to testing the entire features to writing HTTP mocks to make sure that tests don't hit any actual backend. To clarify, this piece takes a lot of shortcuts. For starters, you should never test against strings. That's what imports and content dictionaries are for. You should also never hard code your URIs. Again, routing dictionaries or auto-generated client from Swagger is the way to go. Lastly, using a native fetch and a custom hook that wraps it is a good solution, but it doesn't scale well. Eventually, you arrive at a situation when you have too many fetches and just too much things to look for. So it's just easier to implement something like React Query. I took these liberties to focus on the problem at hand, which is React and TDD, and not to spend too much time polishing the application around. It would require either a very lengthy videos or a lot of jumps, in which you would have like one version of code and then bam, another version of code. It would just not be a good watch. Test-driven development, as mentioned earlier, is a great way to develop your application. It takes time, but it rewards you with tested software you can push further with confidence. Thank you for watching till the end and happy testing!